There's a horse still standing in the middle of the Red River, water rushing past its chest, ears pinned flat, eyes white with terror. And about 40 feet downstream, there's a hat floating in the current, just a hat, spinning slow in the brown water like it's got nowhere to be. The man who wore that hat woke up this morning, ate cold biscuits and bacon grease, cinched his saddle tight, told the cook he'd see him on the other side. That was 3 hours ago. Now 22 men stand on the north bank, nobody saying a word, just watching that hat drift south toward the Gulf of Mexico. They won't find his body for 2 days, tangled in cottonwood roots a mile downstream, belt still buckled, boots still on, lungs full of river mud. And here's the thing that'll stay with me until I die. He didn't drown because the river was deep. He drowned because of something he did before he ever touched the water. Something every man on that cattle drive had done 100 times. Something most people today would call smart, reasonable, safe even. And it killed him. Now most folks hear cowboy drowning and they picture wild rapids, spooked cattle, a horse losing its footing in a flash flood, chaos, nature. But when you read the first-hand accounts from the cattle drive era, the letters home, the trail boss diaries, the coroner reports from river towns that processed more dead cowboys than dead outlaws, a pattern shows up that nobody talks about. The number one killer wasn't deep water. It wasn't fast current. It wasn't even the horse. It was the boots. Stay with me, because this goes deeper than you think. And before we're done, I'm going to show you the exact method the old-timers used, the one that saved more lives than any rope or rifle. I'm also going to show you why almost everything you've seen in Western movies is dead wrong. I want to be straight with you about something. When you start reading the actual letters these men sent home, not the dime novels, not the Hollywood versions, the real letters, a pattern shows up that changes everything you thought you knew about how cowboys died. The river shows up more than anything else, more than stampedes, more than gunfights, more than disease, and the way it took men was almost never the way you'd expect. If you watch any Western film made after 1950, you'll see cowboys crossing rivers the same way every time, sitting tall in the saddle, reins tight, spurs on, boots deep in the stirrups, looking heroic. And that image, that posture, that confidence, it was a death sentence. Because here's what Hollywood never understood, and what the real frontier learned through blood. A mounted man in deep stirrups with tall boots is a drowning waiting to happen. The mechanics are brutal and simple. When a horse enters water deep enough to swim, everything changes about how it moves. A horse swimming is not like a horse walking. The motion becomes unpredictable, vertical, surging. Now picture this. You're sitting on that horse. Your feet are shoved into stirrups. Your boots, those 18-inch tall leather boots that take you 5 minutes to pull on in the morning, they're wet now, swelling, gripping your calves like a vice. The horse lurches, tips, maybe rolls. You need to kick free, and you can't. Those stirrups that kept you safe on dry land are coffin locks now. Those boots that protected you from brush and snake and cactus are anchors. The old hands knew it, and some of them wrote it down. The Trail Drivers of Texas, a collection of first-hand accounts published in 1925, contains more drowning stories than all other causes of death combined. River after river, year after year, the Brazos, the Colorado, the Cimarron, the Arkansas, and the worst of all, the Red River. Colonel Charles Goodnight, one of the most experienced trail bosses who ever lived, documented his observations about the Pecos River crossings with the kind of cold clarity you'd expect from a man who watched the water take cattle and men alike. He didn't call it tragedy. He called it consequence. The river didn't care how fine your saddle was. Let's talk about what actually happened out there. Historians estimate tens of thousands of men rode those trails over 25 years. Between 1866 and 1890, Texas to Kansas, Kansas to Montana, Montana to wherever the beef was needed. How many died? Nobody kept clean records. Trail deaths were recorded when someone bothered to write them down, and often not even then. But the first-hand accounts tell us something the missing numbers can't. Drowning shows up more than anything else, more than stampedes, more than lightning, more than gunfights. When you read enough of these accounts, one thing becomes clear. The dangerous crossings weren't always the ones that looked dangerous. A man could look at a river, see calm water, reasonable depth, a gentle current, and still be dead 20 minutes later, because the river had dead things in it that you couldn't see from the bank, submerged rocks that caught boots and held them, undercut banks that collapsed the moment a horse's weight touched them, bottom currents that moved different from the surface, slower up top, violent below. And the men who died in those crossings were often the confident ones, the experienced riders, the ones who'd crossed 100 rivers and stopped being afraid of them. That's when the river collected its debt. So what did the survivors know? This is the part that matters. Keep this in your head. Captain Randolph Marcy spent years traveling the western frontier, and in 1859 he published something that every serious traveler should have carried, a manual called the Prairie Traveler. It was issued to Army officers and sold to civilians, and it contained the kind of practical knowledge that came from men who'd learned it the hard way. On river crossings, Marcy was not subtle. He specifically instructed mounted men to withdraw their feet from the stirrups before entering swimming depth water. He didn't suggest it, he commanded it. The reason was simple. If the horse went over, you needed to be gone. Not struggling, not pulling, gone. Instantly, beyond that, experienced cowboys did something that looks almost crazy to modern eyes. They removed their boots entirely before serious crossings. Boots came off and got tied to the saddle horn. Sometimes trousers went with them, gun belt, anything that could snag or drag or swell with water and trap a man. For reading the water before you trusted it, the mountain men and experienced trail hands had a method passed down through enough separate accounts that it was clearly common knowledge among men who crossed rivers for a living. Before committing to a crossing, you throw a stick into the water at your proposed entry point. Then you watch. If the stick moves fast on top, but the water beneath looks smooth and consistent, you've got a deep channel with manageable current. You can work with that. If the stick moves slow but you see boils and swirls rising up from below, you've got an undercut bank or a submerged obstacle creating hydraulics underneath. That's where men died. The water lies to your eyes. The stick tells the truth. The old hands also learned to watch for what they called nervous water, surface patterns that seem inconsistent, jumpy, changing rhythm without reason. That usually meant rocks below, uneven bottom, the kind of terrain that catches a boot in 2 seconds and holds it for good. If you want to read the actual source material on this, Marcy's Prairie Traveler from 1859 is public domain now. You can find it free online. It reads like a conversation with a man who'd seen everything the frontier could throw at a person and survived most of it. But let's keep moving. Here's what I want you to remember. If you take nothing else from this, take this. The old hands called it different things in different places, but the principle was consistent across cavalry manuals, trapper accounts, and trail boss instructions. I'm going to call it the 2-point rule. Never let the river trap you at more than 2 points. If your feet are locked in stirrups, that's 2 points right there. Add wet swelling boots that grip your calves, and you're already past the limit. Now you've got no freedom left. One thing goes wrong. Horse stumbles, saddle shifts, current takes your weight sideways, and you're pinned. The cowboys who survived understood what the cavalry manuals made explicit. You need to be able to release instantly, without thinking. Feet free from stirrups, no tight clothing snagging on saddle hardware, hands ready to push away from the horse, not tangled in reins. 2 points maximum, anything more, and the river has already made its decision about you. You just don't know it yet. Now let me tell you something that might be hard to hear. Your horse is not your partner in deep water. I don't mean the animal wants to hurt you. I mean its survival instincts will operate without regard for yours. Completely. Without hesitation. A swimming horse is operating on something older than training. The minute those hooves leave solid ground, the animal's instincts take over in ways that no amount of handling can fully predict. A swimming horse will climb. If it feels itself going under, it will try to climb onto anything solid. A rock, a log. There are documented accounts in period sources of men being pushed under by their own horses, not out of malice, out of pure animal panic, the horse simply trying to keep its own head above water, using whatever was nearby as a platform. This is why experienced mountain men often crossed rivers beside their horses rather than on them when the water got deep enough to swim. Osborne Russell's journals from his years trapping in the 1830s describe multiple crossings in Snake River country where the method was consistent among the men he traveled with. Stay beside the horse, not on it. Use the animal's strength and momentum to help carry you across. But stay clear of those scrambling hooves. The horse fights the river. You fight nothing. You just move. It works because you're using the animal's power without becoming a target for its panic. Now let me be straight with you, because I'd rather give you something true than something impressive. Everything I've described has limits, real ones. The boot removal method, the 2-point rule, swimming beside your horse, these work when you have time to prepare. A crossing you can scout. Water temperatures that won't shut your body down before you reach the other side. They do not work everywhere. In the spring snowmelt rivers of Montana and Wyoming, the water temperature alone could kill a man before the current did. It doesn't matter if your feet are free, if your muscles lock up in the first 30 seconds. The old-timers knew this. There's a reason the cattle trails waited for late spring before moving north. Not just for grass. For water that wouldn't stop a man's heart in his chest. And these methods assume you have a choice. Flash floods don't give you choices. The Pecos River in summer could go from knee-deep to swimming depth in less than an hour if a storm hit anywhere in the watershed. No time for stick tests, no time for boot removal. Just the water and whatever decision you could make in the next 3 seconds. Good night and loving lost men on the Pecos specifically because the trail schedule demanded crossings that the river wasn't willing to cooperate with. The pressure to deliver cattle on time killed men as surely as any current, and some rivers simply could not be crossed safely at certain times of year. The smartest thing a man could do at those rivers in those seasons was wait. And waiting when the whole drive is behind you and the buyer is expecting you and every day costs money, takes a kind of courage that doesn't make it into the stories. I want to hear from you. Did anyone in your family ever pass down a rule about water, a river crossing, a flood? Something your grandfather said once that you never forgot and maybe never fully understood until you needed it? Leave it in the comments. Next one is going to be different, and almost nobody talks about it today. Stay close, because that knowledge is disappearing. Every generation that goes without passing it down is a generation that has to learn it the hard way. And the river is not a forgiving teacher.